Stage one of the 2021 AJ Bell Tour of Britain in Cornwall for the first time in the race's recent history. Penzance and the Western Promenade, the departure point for a 180.8 kilometre stage over hilly territory to Bodmin. A stellar start list, including the world champion Julien Alaphilippe, his teammate Mark Cavendish, and Wout Van Aert, the clear favourite not just for today's stage but also for overall victory over the piece. 8 stages in length. The first of the stages, a really testing one. Hills all the way, as the race was flagged off by the race director, and the attacks started from kilometre zero on a climb. It was the Israel Startup Nation and Swift Carbon who launched the first of the attacks. But Nick Dlamini from Quebecer Nextash was the key rider to tease out a counter-attack and eventually form a group of 5 riders. He was joined by the American champion Joey Roscoff, riding for the rally team, and by 3 domestic riders, including a teenager from the Great Britain team in Ollie Stockwell, but Canyon DHB's former King of the Mountains winner in 2019, Jake Scott, was the rider who took the first of 3 categorised climbs on the day. Zenna went to him. He picked up 4 points with Max Walker from Trinity Racing in 2nd place, Ollie Stockwell in 3rd and Joey Roscoff in 4th. Then at the second climb of the day, Nick Dlamini, who'd unclipped at the first King of the Mountains and was unable to compete, picked up the 2nd climb of the day. And then the first of 2 intermediate sprints in Hale. That sprint taken by Jake Scott, who'd also taken the first climb of the day to put himself in pole position for 2 of the jerseys up for grabs from the breakaway. Second sprint of the day at Penryn, also going to Jake Scott with some ease, sprinting off the front of the 5-man group. Jake Scott then in the lead in the sprints competition and level on points in the King of the Mountains. His 2nd place to Nick Dlamini over the final climb of the day, enough to secure him at the end of the day the King of the Mountains jersey. So the last 2 winners of the King of the Mountains competition at the Tour of Britain, Dlamini and Jake Scott, doing battle for the King of the Mountains jersey. Those 5 riders then briefly dislodging Ollie Stockwell as he had to recover from a minor mechanical, sorting it out himself, and the teenager from the Great Britain team with a cyclocross background smartly remounting his bike a la cyclocross and getting back on. Joey Roscoff then, after puncturing, was caught, and shortly after that Nick Dlamini decided that enough was enough for his day out, leaving 3 riders out front, still with plenty of uncategorised climbs to come. 30 seconds the gap as the peloton started to bear down on the riders in the breakaway, and Ollie Stockwell fled the coupe and went off the front. But shortly later, when Jimmy Janssens got on the front from Alpecin Fenix, he too was caught, and then it all came back together again. A flowing, sharp right-hander then dumped 3 riders on the ground, including George Bennett from Jumbo Visma and 1 or 2 other riders from the Israel Startup Nation and Alpecin Fenix too. That split the peloton briefly on the run-in as Mark Cavendish drove the pace from Deceuninck Quickstep, trying to set up a victory either for Davide Ballerini or potentially for the world champion Julien Alaphilippe. Cavendish taking them over the last climb, and then Yves Lampaert, his teammate, taking them through 1 kilometre. A little climb then into Bodmin and down towards the final 700 metres, and a testing little ramp to get over before a drag up to the finish line. And it was the Ineos Grenadiers who took control of the front of the bike race. Michał Kwiatkowski, lurking in 3rd wheel, then took them over the last little lump and onto the final ramp. Steep slopes. Julien Alaphilippe then on the wheel of Michał Kwiatkowski. Ethan Hayter from the Ineos Grenadiers, and alongside him Mikel Honoré of the Deceuninck Quickstep team. Wout Van Aert though ominously lurking on the wheels of those riders towards the fore. Gonzalo Serrano from Movistar, as well as Ethan Hayter latched onto the wheel of Alaphilippe, who couldn't get clear. And with a couple of 100 metres to go, just dropped away, and Wout Van Aert got off his wheel and started to power home. Wout Van Aert, though, could he be caught? A fast-finishing Niels Eekhoff, the Dutchman from DSM, pushing Van Aert all the way, but the Belgian national champion seeing it home and taking the win. His first race on European soil since returning from the Olympic Games. His first race back in Europe since winning on the Champs-Élysées. Comes to the Tour of Britain and takes the first stage and takes the leader's jersey into Devon, where the race will continue the next day. Living up to his favourite status then, the AJ Bell blue jersey on his shoulders for the race lead. Jumbo Visma's irrepressible Wout Van Aert, one of the stars of the Tour de France, lighting up the AJ Bell Tour of Britain, winning stage 1 and leading the general classification by 4 seconds to Niels Eekhoff. Gonzalo in 3rd place, and Ethan Hayter, the best of the Brits, back in 4th at 10 seconds. For Adam to get in. The Queen stage of the AJ Bell Tour of Britain 2021, a 210-kilometre hilly slog from Aberaeron to the Great Orme in Llandudno, and a punchy uphill finish. Ethan Hayter having taken over the race lead. A slight delay at kilometre 0 for riders to get back on, and then a standing start as the flag dropped and the attacks starting straight away. Eventually a 6-man group getting away, including local hero Griff Lewis, resident of Aberystwyth, through which the race was about to pass. He was joined by 5 others in hot weather once again on this race. It's late summer, continuing to have temperatures in the high 20s. The virtual leader, Bob Donaldson from Great Britain, who was only 3 minutes 17 seconds down on GC as the attacks began to unfold for the first of the Iceberg sprints. Griff Lewis, having just passed through his hometown of Aberystwyth, then took the first sprint at Borth. Good result for him, but then they headed inland and up onto the first categorised climb of the day, the Cat 2 Bulchlimbach. Hard climb, a long climb, and over the top, Jake Scott taking further maximum points to extend his lead in the Skoda King of the Mountains competition. The peloton then starting to ride a slightly more controlling pace to Koenig Quickstep and Jumbo Visma after Ineos had allowed the break to gain a 9-minute advantage. Julien Alaphilippe and Wout Van Aert, as well as Ethan Hayter, imagining that they would do battle at the finish line at Great Orme. Then the second sprint of the day at Tal Sanai, 86 kilometres from home. Jake's got a formality there, picking up 3 more points, this time unopposed by Griff Lewis, as on the next climb, the climb of Eithar's Well, on the outskirts of Snowdonia, a counter-attack went off the front of 2 riders from Trinity Racing, Ben Healy and Tom Gloag, as well as Marc Soler from Movistar. Those riders then briefly rode across to the front of the race as this 10-kilometre climb continued to ascend all the way up to the top, which was 65 kilometres from home. Over the top then, a further 10 points to his tally in the King of the Mountains competition went to Jake Scott, with Nicolas Sessler from the Global 6 team on his wheel. Then, first of all, Healy and Gloag got across, and Marc Soler eventually making it a 9-man group. On the descent, though, off the climb, under pressure from Koenig Quickstep, it all came back together again. A crash for one of the Great Britain riders, going down hard as the pressure was exerted on the front. Then it calmed down, and that allowed another trio of riders to get up the road. Max Canter and David Gonzalez from Caja Rural Seguros, as well as Mauro Schmidt. It was Mauro Schmidt and Gonzalez who lasted longest before they were caught. Then on the Marine Drive climb, Matteo Jorgensen from Movistar attacked a long way out and soloed over the top of the Marine Drive climb, 6 kilometres from home. Dropping down then onto the flat roads, he was caught again as Wout Van Aert was piloted into pole position, and then they hit the savage slopes of the final climb to Great Orme. Julien Alaphilippe opening up a soft attack with Mike Woods from the Israel Startup Nation and Wout Van Aert just distance at this point, and the 2 pure climbers going free, but Wout Van Aert pegged them back as the road flattened out. Ethan Hayter, who'd found himself distanced on the really steep section, then just about made the junction, but at that point Julien Alaphilippe's teammate, the Danish rider Michael Honoré, accelerated again, taking Van Aert with him and Julien Alaphilippe. Those trio of riders going clear as Ethan Hayter in the blue jersey started to drop away and get distanced in the final 100 metres or so. Julien Alaphilippe then coming round his teammate and sprinting for home. Van Aert almost alongside him at this point as the finish line neared, and within the last 10-20 metres, lunging for the line, the Belgian national champion denied Julien Alaphilippe victory, and Van Aert took win number 2 of the Tour of Britain. The margin slender, but the result clear from this helicopter shot. The bike throw at the end making the difference, and Julien Alaphilippe and Wout Van Aert at the full extent of their capabilities. Van Aert collapsing, helmet to one side, gulping the air in, and receiving the congratulations of his old rival, Julien Alaphilippe. Van Aert, though, taking over the race lead, courtesy of the 10 seconds time bonus and the gap that he got on the road to the blue jersey of Ethan Hayter. It was an 8-second gap on the road. He only needed 6, and that means that the Belgian Wout van Aert is now in control again of the race by 2 seconds to Ethan Hayter. Julien Alaphilippe is in 3rd at 11 seconds, and who would bet against those 3 riders being on the final podium in Aberdeen? 198 kilometres from a start in overcast conditions in Carlisle to Gateshead. Ethan Hayter from the Ineos Grenadiers restored to the lead. Wout Van Aert, the challenger, discussing tactics on what could be another very attacking day. Could also be a day for a breakaway to stay away, as the gaps in the general classification opened up subsequent to the racing in Llandudno and the team time trial. Attacks from the start then, and a long and very dynamic opening phase of racing before eventually a group of riders got away, including and animated by a certain Mark Cavendish. He was part of a 9-man move that eventually coalesced together, including his teammate Tim de Klerk. Mark Donovan in the black of DSM was also in this breakaway group, as well as George Bennett, 2 riders riding high in the general classification. For a while, things stalled as Rory Townsend from the Canyon DHB Sun God team took the first of the intermediate sprints, but then the Ineos Grenadiers started to ride. The group at the front then split in 2, and briefly Mark Cavendish and George Bennett were the wrong side of the split. They got back on, but Mark Donovan, who started the day just 1 minute and 42 seconds down on GC, as the race went through the second sprint in Donovan's hometown of Penrith, was off the back in the company of Mason Hollyman, and those 2 riders were eventually caught. The immediate threat of losing the blue jersey then for the Ineos Grenadiers was neutralised as the climbing began to start. 3 climbs, first the climb of Hartside, Donovan and Hollyman being reabsorbed back into the peloton, leaving just 7 riders on the exposed 7-kilometre climb to the top of Hartside. Rory Townsend then, without his teammate Jake Scott in the breakaway, just assuring that nobody picked up 30 points available on today's climb. There were points available though at the back from the peloton. Jake Scott attacked with Nicolas Sessler picking up the minor placings in the King of the Mountains competition. Much more of that, and Jake Scott would have sealed the King of the Mountains competition. Meanwhile, a crash at the back of the peloton involving Will Bergfeldt and Alex Peters, just with 90 kilometres to go, put them off the back, but able to resume racing. And Jake Scott, attacking with his teammate Matt Bostock, crested the second climb of the day and almost put the King of the Mountains technically and mathematically out of sight for everybody else. Over the top of the final climb of the day, the 7 riders were still together. Mark Cavendish and his teammate Tim de Klerk, as well as George Bennett and Colin Joyce of the rally team. Jake Scott then ensured mathematically that no one could win the King of the Mountains competition other than him, and received the applause of the Ineos Grenadiers. The race then blighted briefly by heavy rainfall as Richie Porte did his work on the front. They took the final sprint in Prideaux, and then the attack started. First it was Mark Cavendish from the front as the time gap started to tumble under pressure from a combination of different teams trying to bring this back. And eventually the riders in the original breakaway were caught. That was the moment then that Wout Van Aert, reacting to an attack from Matteo Jorgensen and James Shaw, really disrupted the race, teasing out Michael Woods, Jorgensen going with him, James Shaw, Julian Alaphilippe was there, Michael Woods and his teammate Dan Martin, Carlos Rodriguez and the blue jersey of Ethan Hayter. Julian Alaphilippe then attacked and tried to get clear with around about 12 kilometres to go, and then a sequence of counter-attacks, this time Ethan Hayter getting onto Mikel Honoré's wheel, Michael Woods launching a long attack and holding off for kilometre after kilometre before he too was reeled in with 1k to go. Carlos Rodriguez and Matteo Jorgensen of the Ineos Grenadiers and Movistar respectively set a pace to deter anyone from attacking. It all looked like it would come back to a group sprint, which indeed it did. Julian Alaphilippe then being led out by Mikel Honoré on his wheel. Ethan Hayter had the almighty problem of Wout Van Aert on his wheel. Hayter sprinting a long way out, Van Aert slipstreaming the race leader to come round him in the final 200 metres and then lunging for the line, out-sprinting both Hayter and Julian Alaphilippe, who finished third. Hayter holding off Alaphilippe to finish in second place, but Van Aert taking win number 3 for the Belgian national champion on stage 6 into Gateshead. The time bonuses, though, would reshape the general classification. Hayter finishing in second place, that would be sufficient for him to hold on to the race lead, but with a diminished advantage to Wout van Aert and 2 stages still remaining. Job well done for Jumbo Visma and their depleted resources, but when you have a rider like this, he can almost do it on his own. His third stage win, Wout van Aert has done nothing wrong in this race, hampered by the crash yesterday and by the puncture in the team time trial, but Ethan Hayter continues to lead the AJ Bell Tour of Britain. This is the reshaped general classification. The time gap between first and second now just 4 seconds with 2 stages remaining. Julian Alaphilippe continues in third, but an increasingly distant third. Ethan Hayter will be under pressure all the way to Aberdeen. Stonehaven on the North Sea coast, the launch pad for the final 173 kilometres of the AJ Bell Tour of Britain for 2021. The finish line in Aberdeen would be a test for the leadership of Ethan Hayter in the Ineos Grenadiers ranks, wearing the blue jersey for the race lead, but just by 4 seconds to Wout van Aert. The Ineos Grenadiers hoping for a calm day out and happy to see a breakaway develop on the road straight away. 6 riders getting across, including the Trinity Racing duo of Tom Clogue and Ben Healy. They were joined by Robin Carpenter, the winner of stage 2, and 3 other riders. This was perfect at this point for the Ineos Grenadiers. Jumbo-Visma controlling the pace as they headed to the first categorised climb of the day, the Cairns Mount, with all the King of the Mountains and the sprints classifications on the road already settled. The brutal slopes of the 3-kilometre climb, too much for Canyon Swift's Will Bergfeldt, who fell victim to the pace being set into a headwind on the barren slopes where huge crowds had gathered towards the top of the biggest and hardest climb of the day. One of the hardest climbs on the entire route of the Tour of Britain. Through all 3 of the intermediate sprints of the day, the breakaway swept up the final points and the bonus seconds, neutralising the GC ride and denying Wout Van Aert and Jumbo-Visma the possibility of taking time on the road. That meant it would all come down to the final run into Aberdeen and the bonus seconds potentially on the finish line, and a bunch sprint now very much on the cards. Wout Van Aert with Ethan Hayter separated by 4 seconds in the general classification. Van Aert gambling that he, with a stage win potentially, would take the race lead at the last. Balata, the last of the 3 intermediate sprints, and the final climb of Queen's View was all that remained before a long run-in, potentially affected by cross tailwinds, and the drop down towards the finish line at Aberdeen. 5 riders at this point still together over the final King of the Mountains of the day at Queen's View, being shepherded by the man in the red jersey, Robin Carpenter from Rally Cycling. De Koning Quickstep then with Julian Alaphilippe riding for Mark Cavendish to try and get him that victory at the Tour of Britain that had so far eluded him on the wheels. Ethan Hayter then being piloted up further towards the front by Michał Kwiatkowski, and the breakaway starting to lose their numbers. Michał Paluta of the Global 6 cycling team, the next rider to go, that left just 4 riders out front, but holding on to a stubborn advantage as they approached Aberdeen. De Koning Quickstep and Jumbo-Visma having to work very hard to bring them back. A minute's advantage proving difficult to snuff out as Ben Healy, the Irish national road race champion, in the company of Joaquin Mogildai from the Caja Rural Seguros team, Robin Carpenter and Tom Gloag held on. But the catch was inevitable. A couple of crashes marred the run into Aberdeen as things got fast and furious. But in the end, Robin Carpenter and Ben Healy accepted that they would be caught inside the final 5 kilometres as Yves Lampaert, the winner into Edinburgh, took De Koning Quickstep ever closer towards the finish line, only to find that Movistar trying to set things up for their sprinter, working on the front, and Alex Dowsett launching a long-range attack. But in the final, it did come down to a lead-out from Julian Alaphilippe with Mark Cavendish on his wheel and Wout Van Aert looking for room, boxed in on the left-hand side. At this point, Ethan Hayter sitting pretty but having to open up his sprint already. Wout Van Aert then coming off the rails, finding a gap, moving in front of Hayter, coming past Andre Greipel, finishing fast, and Mark Cavendish to take the win, with Ethan Hayter rolling in the minor placings and out of the general classification lead. In the end, Wout Van Aert had it all. The stage win, and after that, with the bonus seconds, the victory in the general classification. Van Aert impregnable, and Van Aert taking to the podium to take the stage win. His 4th win, winner of 50% of all the stages on the Tour of Britain. A triumph for Jake Scott, who took home the King of the Mountains and the sprints jersey. And then it was Alaphilippe, Ethan Hayter and Wout Van Aert who took to the top 3 steps of the podium. 6 seconds in the end, the gap between first and second, as Ethan Hayter had to settle for second place with Julian Alaphilippe in third, but the victory going to Wout Van Aert.